Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We're coming to you live on June 18th. If we have any NLC webinar first timers here today who don't know, our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Creek word for learning. And today we're going to be learning about the tribal housing resources for Native veterans from your instructor, Marie Bonville. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that you could join us for today's webinar. If you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud, know that this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We do also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So just a friendly reminder that the materials you see today, they are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Before we get started, I want to make sure you're familiar with how the environment works and know some of the tools available to you to interact today. So if you look at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon of a hand with a plus sign. If you click on that icon, know that you can either raise your hand, agree, disagree, show applause, show laughter, or even signal requests to the instructor, like asking them to speak louder or to slow down. Now your screen should look similar to the graphic that you see displayed. To the bottom left, you're going to see a pod that says Files. Here's where you can find some handouts and appendix items, as well as a copy of today's presentations for your download. If you want to do that, you just hover over the item that you want to download with your mouse, and then click the arrow pointing downwards to download and save it onto your device. The next box over is labeled Web Links. Here's where you can find a copy of today's webinar feedback survey. You can subscribe to the emailing list. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. And then finally, all the way over to the all the way over to the right, we have the chat box available. Note that this is how you will communicate with the instructors as well as me, the NLC staff, during today's webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to type those into the chat box. You just type them in and then hit enter or click on the up arrow icon button to submit. We do encourage class participation, so feel free to write in your questions or your comments. And if you're experiencing any tech support issues, you can submit those as well to the chat box, and I'll try to help you out as best I can. Know that most tech support issues could be solved by just exiting and then re-entering the meeting room. No, attendees do not have do not have microphone rights. So if you have a question or a comment, just feel free to send it into the chat. But let's all take a moment to try out the chat box together, if you don't mind. Go ahead and let us know your name, where you're joining us from, your tribal affiliation, and your work or the role that you play in Indian country. All right, folks, with that, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's amazing instructor, Marie Bonville. And Marie, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brooke, for that introduction to the Native Learning Center, for having us back. We've got a jam-packed session today, and with so many folks in the room eager to hear more about tribal housing resources for Native veterans, we're just going to get right to it. A little bit about me. I started my career with the Seminole Tribe of Florida way back when. Won't give you a year, but I've held different positions in education and also at the Native Learning Center as Director of Training and Technical Assistance. So my goal is to provide our housing authorities and TDHEs, our partners in housing, with information as to real time, what's going on in our environments, how we can improve our programming, and how we can build our professional skills. So I'm excited to bring with us today so much information that I don't even think it'll all fit. I'm so excited. We've got the Native American Direct Loan staff actually present with us here today, along with a very informative session on tribal VASH with a veteran support services minded person who's going to provide you with all information necessary to navigate and build your capacity for a program like VASH. But we're going to talk about how we can evaluate our programs to see where this information, this outreach can fit, right? So our training objectives, of course, is to learn about the Native American Direct Loan, to learn about VASH, certainly eligibility, key features, and benefits to our communities. As I think about June and it being National Homeownership Month, I'm so thankful that we're going to be able to take this information and hopefully turn it into content information that you can use in your community and really promote the work that's being done. You're going to see me skip over a few slides, and that's just because since we have the staff available and the resources and the individuals who are experts in their different programming, I felt like it's necessary to give you slides. So as Brooke said, at the bottom of each file box, you're going to see the presentation and you can download that at any time. So there are some slides I'm going to skip over, and that's only because that information is also going to be provided by, in some cases, the NADL staff, and in other cases, Bridget Course, a VASH specialist. So what you need to know from my perspective is I work with the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. I worked with their Home Buyer Readiness Committee in particular. And the goal there was to help practitioners build a Native veteran homeownership program or education and training. And this was right during the transition with COVID. So most of us were virtual, right? And so the idea was, well, how do we increase the information and get that information out to our community? Well, the first step was a housing needs assessment. So the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition's Veteran Housing Needs Assessment, it brought all the partners, right? We had to get all the stakeholders involved so that we could have a successful needs assessment. And that included the tribal veteran service officers, of course, to provide us with a better understanding of the circumstances, the challenges, and the needs of the veterans that they serve. And this included Cheyenne River Housing Authority, Oglala Sioux Lakota Housing, and Siston-Wapton Housing Authority. So published in 2019, it's available on their website. We were able to learn some of that information, and we had definitely a very moving opportunity during our 2022 annual conference to talk about both what we learned from the needs assessment and also to really come together and decide on what we were going to do to increase our efforts when it comes to homeownership and homelessness in our Native veteran community. So I just real quick want to pause and say that the story of home is really important. And in the case of why it's important of coming home, this gentleman here, his name is Army Private First Class Melvin Littlebear. He was reported missing in action on February 13th, 1951. He was held as a prisoner of war and later died that summer. Private Littlebear's remains were brought back to the United States in 1954 under Operation Glory, but because investigators were unable to identify him, he was initially buried at the National Memorial Cemetery in the Pacific, of the Pacific in Hawaii. Thankfully, Private Littlebear was identified by the Defense POW MIA accounting agency and was laid to rest at home in Little Eagle, South Dakota, finally on September 30th, 2022. Our veterans know the importance of coming home. And so it's really important that when we think about housing and we think about the homelessness efforts that we're working on in our communities, that we keep them in mind, because sometimes I think that with our programs and the eligibility and all the requirements, all the things that they have to do, they're very mission-minded. These individuals are mission-minded. And so to not be able to accomplish the mission of homeownership or of, getting the support that they need if they're in a homelessness situation, then, really that's what I'm so thankful we're able to do. So I have a special thanks to the folks that informed me in my work, Robert Dunsmore of Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and Jerry Oswald of Siston-Wapton, because they informed the way we decided on the training that we would impart. So this is a little bit about the survey participants that we had last time. They're actually doing a new needs assessment now, and that's going to be South Dakota tribe-wide. So that's going to be neat. But the results of that needs assessment found that 75% of respondents who were interested in a home reported having no understanding or minimal understanding of the NADL home loan program. 62% were not aware of the Veterans Home Loan Program, which is separate from the NADL. 62% weren't aware of that program either. 15% of the survey respondents said that they either are living in doubled up with family or friends, which is not uncommon in our communities, and that tribal veteran homeowners indicated that they either needed renovation of some sort or total replacement. And so they weren't aware of maybe financing or refinancing for renovation. So knowing that there's a need for education, there's a few things that we went ahead and did. So the Cheyenne River Housing Authority was the first to provide a virtual homebuyer education training that was completely customized for the Native veterans. As you'll see here, this was our first class. And, it kind of was divided. We had folks in the housing authority on site. So the class could be attended virtual, and there were a few attendees there. But we also, knowing that generational wise, that there are some veterans that preferred to, come to the housing authority, we provided that option as well. So our first training was June 22nd of 2021. So there's some outreach materials. I do have to say that Sharon Vogel, Executive Director of the Housing Authority, along with Michelle Running Wolf, really took their time with this program to ask me questions and determine what would be the best route for a virtual training program to deliver to our veterans. We met with the NADL staff several times to also make sure that they would be available. Rather than doing one session, they were able to do 4 sessions and have an in-depth review on the process from eligibility to construction and all of those integral, important parts of what it takes to get a home built on the reservation. And so we were able to kind of create our own little training tool that we could share with other tribes. So giving those best practices out to other communities. This is a breakdown of what our trainings look like and the partners that we asked to provide information. So of course we had land office, we had the NADL staff several times. We had insurance and other providers. We used a lot of training tools and kept it engaging because you are in a virtual setting. But we talked about the down payment assistance programs, the extra, in this environment with cost of housing being so high, definitely we had to make sure that they had an understanding of what they would have to bring to the table. And even though it's 100% loan, there are fees and other things they need to be made aware of. The construction of the home and that process, market conditions. So if they're in Rapid City and they're using the VA loan versus the NADL, which is on tribal trust land. So, of course, Indian Health Services was a part of that conversation. So it was just a wraparound training services. We wanted to bring this to you first, just to give you an idea of things that you might want to put into your own training as you think of a veteran-specific training program. And it may not be just your tribe. You may want to open it up to the surrounding area, but we just thought that it was important for you to be aware of what we were doing, and hopefully you all can do the same. As a quote here says, "As a service member, it was awesome. I enjoyed learning how to become a homeowner and the different options that were available to purchase a home." I have gone to other trainings where it's kind of like a free-for-all. Whoever wants information on homeownership can attend. But when you're a veteran, there's such a process to this that we want to ensure that they feel comfortable with it, and that they're not maybe bounced back and forth between, loan officers, that are familiar with maybe the VA home loan, but not with the NADL. So a little bit about our training results. We had 8 attendees in the first class. We were able to issue 5 certificates there. From that, we actually had one veteran that was deployed, active service member that was deployed. And so we found a way to work around that to assist him as well. So that was some of the learning curves that we found that we needed to maybe address. We recorded a few sessions to make it more feasible for that individual. And then the spring virtual session, we had 10 attendees. So people were talking at that point, and then we were able to get 6 of those certificate of completions. So that was a big help to them. Another quote is, "Ten Hut, we salute you. Your 12-week program provided us with guidance and tools. It gave us hope and preparation, sustaining us to the point of setting a first class goal." And so for me, that means a lot in that these were the tools we were able to impart that got the veterans motivated to accomplish this mission of homeownership. So with that, I will go ahead and invite our NADL staff on. I have the pleasure of introducing Arthur Valdez and Craig Philbeck. So Go ahead and take it away, guys.
No problem. And again, my name's Arthur Valdez. I work as an ADL loan coordinator. I've been with the VA for a little over 16 years. I come from a real estate and appraisal background. And today we're going to talk about the NADL program, again, Native American Direct Loan Program. Again, the VA is a principal lender and directly lends funds to eligible Native American veterans or a veteran that's married to a Native American and non-veteran for the purpose of purchasing, constructing, or improving a home on trust land. Again, it has to be on federal trust land. Some of the benefits of our program is, of course, like regular VA loans, there's no down payment required. There's no private mortgage insurance. There's very minimal closing and transaction costs. And we can offer you a low fixed rate mortgage for 30 years, which currently our rate is 2.5%, which is extraordinarily low as you compare it to a regular VA or other financing out there. Again, these loans are also assumable for qualified borrowers, and we try to continue supporting the veteran after the closing, try to make sure that we can answer any questions and help them through the process of making their payments. Now, what's the benefits for the tribe? Again, the tribal benefits are it frees up tribal funds to use in other areas. For example, if some tribes may offer a owner finance where you have a lease with an option to purchase. Therefore, the cost or the value of that home is tied up in the note. Whereas if they were to sell it, they can use those funds to build additional homes if necessary. The other thing for the tribe is it supports the local economy. We're going to ask veterans to select builders from their area. We try to use inspectors from the same market area as well. And of course, they typically will get the workers from the same market area that the home is located in. Now, one of the things that is required is an agreement between the tribe and the VA before we can even make any loans. Again, when the law requires that the federally recognized tribe and the VA sign a memorandum of understanding. Again, that we use the term MOU, and simply, well, right now we have 113 MOUs that have been federally recognized tribes in the VA. We've made over 1,243 loans as of February 2024, and have been made with Native American veterans totaling $179.8 million in funds. Now, the MOU really sounds confusing, but it's a simple document that's drawn up between the VA and the tribe, and it mentions their building codes, talks about a foreclosure procedure if necessary, talks about the different interests in the land, whether it's tribal fee land or it's trust land. Again, we have to go with trust land. So again, all these details are worked out in this written agreement. We want to make sure that we respect the tribal land and their rules. For example, if we're going to build a new home, one of the things that's required is a historical um, survey. Make sure there's nothing that we're going to be building on that's sacred. So again, we work together very closely to make sure we respect the tribe's laws and rules. Again, just like I said earlier, the tribe must adopt a foreclosure eviction priority of lien procedure and leasing procedures. The tribal court must acknowledge that the tribe has enacted the required legal procedures that it will enforce these procedures. Must provide for the acquisition by the veteran of meaningful interest in the lot and or dwelling on the trust land, and must provide for conveyance of the veteran's meaningful interest as security for the loan. Again, details that were worked out all ahead of time. So once the tribe and the VA have this in place, the veteran simply has to, select his land that the tribe will allocate to him, and then if he wants to build on it, or maybe there's already a home he'd like to purchase. Again, the tribe will submit MOU inquiry to VA at NADL and VA.gov. The VA Central Office will assist the tribe through the MOU approval process. Again, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. The VA Central Office gets final approval and signatures, and the VA team begins taking new loan applications. Again, a lot of times they'll have a MOU signing ceremony, as you can see below, because it does open the doors to your Native American veterans to be able to get these low interest, no down payment loans. So it's kind of a really big deal. Once again, the overview of the loan process, you need to think this of the VA as a lender. Again, since it's a direct loan, we're not going to any mortgage company. We're doing everything in-house. Right now, we have 6 loan coordinators that cover the U.S., and we all do the complete processing. Now, again, the VA will determine the eligibility. We review the income and expenses of a veteran to qualify the borrower. Determine property value. Again, we'll need a VA appraisal done. And then we actually will assist with the closing. Again, the tribal organization must have a signed MOU with the VA. The Native American veteran must have meaningful interest in leasehold allotted land and be an active member of the tribe. Native American veterans must have sufficient lengths of service and character of service. Again, anytime you get a VA loan, we have to request a COE. A COE means Certificate of Eligibility. Your loan coordinator will help you with that process, but most of the time, if you serve at least 2 years and you have what they call uh, release under uh, not general, but just a regular service, then you shouldn't have any problem getting a COE, and we'll do that for you. And again, an interest, typically when a tribe gives a Native American veteran some land, is usually a land lease. Now, it's important that we look at the terms of the lease. Typically, a lease is 50 or 99 years, which is great because we have to use a factor of minus 14. So if they have an older lease that says only 30 years left, we have to subtract 14. So that means that we can only make a shorter loan. Well, would that be 16 years loan versus a 30-year loan? So the term of the lease is important. Okay, I think Craig is going to take it on from here. So I'll be available to answer your questions at the end.
Okay, thank you, Art. My name is Craig Philbeck. I'm also a Native American direct loan coordinator, same as Art. Just real quick, I've been with the VA for 3 years. I have a background in appraisal and lending, and I'm also a veteran. And as a coordinator like Art, we do outreach, loan processing, underwriting, and closing. So we kind of do everything from A to Z as a coordinator. So when a veteran is assigned to a coordinator, we're with them from the beginning to the end. So with that being said, we're going to move into how to get a NATO loan and what that process is. So first of all, you request an application from us either through our email or by calling us, and we'll provide that contact information at the end. So you're going to fill out an application, you're going to send it in to us, and then we're going to start underwriting the loan. And with a NATO loan, with a NATO mortgage, it's just like applying for any other kind of loan. We're going to ask for financial documents such as paycheck stubs, W-2s, award letters, bank statements, tax returns, and so forth. When it comes to income, we're looking for stable and reliable income that's looking to continue, so we know that our veterans can afford the payments. Also, when getting pre-approved for the loan, we're going to ask for a copy of the home site lease agreement, and Art kind of touched on that. We need the home site lease agreement to extend at least 14 years past the term of the loan. In addition to gathering those documents, we'll also ask for a tribal ID or a certificate of Indian blood. We need our Native veterans to be enrolled members of that tribe of which we have an MOU with. Okay, so kind of like what I said before, we're going to look for stable, reliable income that's expected to continue. So Social Security, service-connected disability, regular employment, even self-employment with tax returns, that's all good, stable, reliable income. And we're also going to run credit. And we're pretty lenient on the credit side. We don't look at credit score. We just want to see 12 months of on-time payment history. So if a veteran recently reestablished his or her credit, as long as payments have been made on time for 12 months, that is our major underwriting factor that we use. Another major factor is debt to income ratio. We need to make sure that our veterans can afford the payments. We don't want to set anybody up for failure. So debt to income ratio, our target is 41%. That's not a that's a flexible number. We can have veterans that have a higher DTI. We just take a little bit closer look at all the financial stuff. A debt to income ratio example, and I'm just going to use just a very simple term. Let's just say a veteran's gross income is $10,000 per month. And including this new home loan and including any debts that the veteran currently has, we want their total debts and including the new home loan to not exceed 41% of their monthly income. So in this instance, if a veteran's making $10,000 a month, then we wouldn't want all their combined debts to exceed $4,100 per month. And sometimes we go as high as 50% DTI, but we try to get around 41% is our goal. Also, when we're underwriting, we're going to look at the veteran's assets because there are some fees associated when closing a mortgage, just like with our NATO loan or a conventional loan or a regular VA loan outside of the reservation. There are some fees that are involved, some upfront costs that are out of pocket, and we are going to get into those. One of which is an appraisal fee. We'll send an appraiser out to the property, take pictures of it. If it's new construction, then we're going to get the plans and specs over to the appraiser to determine a credible market value to make sure the veteran isn't being overcharged for the home based upon market rates. Another out-of-pocket fee is a construction compliance inspection fee. What that is if the contractor is being paid by percentage, when they're 25% done, if they're looking for 25% of the payment, then we will send out a compliance inspector to make sure that the work was done in a workmanlike manner and is completed to that 25% mark. Appraisal fees are generally $700 to $900. The appraisers are independent contractors and not employees of the VA. So that money goes directly to the appraiser and not to the VA. Same thing with compliance inspectors. A lot of times the appraiser and the compliance inspector is the same person. Compliance inspections are $225 each. There usually is 5 to 6 of them. Also money going directly to that independent contractor. So we have some other things. Now moving into the appraisal, what the appraiser needs to derive a credible value. The appraiser is going to want the purchase agreement or construction contract. They're going to want to see building permits if required. I know on some tribal lands, building permits are not required. They're going to want to see plans and specs, like what type of countertops, what type of materials are going into the home. They're going to want to see the lease agreement. The appraiser can look at the title status report to see if there's any liens or whatnot. The appraiser will also look to receive a water and sewage report and to see what's also going on with the gas and electrical, if it's there, if it's not there, if it needs to go into the loan. Okay, some other requirements with our loan is this VA benefit, this home loan is for our veterans' primary residence. It's not to be purchased for like a rental property or something like that. So the veteran needs to intend to occupy the home. We will have them sign a certification that anything else basically constitutes fraud. So it's very important that this benefit is used for a veteran's primary residence. If they have a previous VA home loan, they are able to rent that one out. But the new home loan, the new home needs to be for a primary residence. Okay, so we're going to look to make sure that the veteran and spouse are satisfactory credit risks. And like I mentioned earlier, we look at stable and reliable income. We also look to see if the veteran's meeting their obligations. Do they have delinquencies within the last 12 months? Or was there a bankruptcy within the last 2 years? That is something that's also taken into consideration for the underwriting process. Oh, and one other thing on this is residual income. After we look at all the veterans' debts versus income, DTI, we also want to see how much money is left over at the end of the month. Depending on the family size, we want to see maybe at least $800 to $1,500 left over at the end of the month to also make sure the veteran has enough money to live off, groceries and so forth. We don't want to set anybody up where they can't afford their payments. Okay, like Art mentioned a little earlier, our interest rate is 2.5%, and that's a fixed rate for up to 30 years. That rate is currently in effect through March of next year. We don't know if it will change, if it'll go up or down. But if anybody were to apply and the loan were to get funded between now and March, our veteran would receive a 2.5% interest rate for up to 30 years. It doesn't have to be 30 years. It could be 15 or 20 years. It's up to the veteran. Like Art said, this is a much better rate than current. This is a much better rate than current market rates because there's no bank involved. This is just money from the U.S. Treasury going directly to the veteran. Leasehold term remaining must be 14 years plus the length of the loan. Some other fees and to consider, and they aren't necessarily fees, but they're items that we require with the loan. We will require the veteran to carry homeowner's insurance. And we do ask for a 1-year policy paid up front. And in areas where there's floods or maybe Pacific Islands where there's hurricanes and so forth, we may require additional insurance. During the construction process, we will request that the contractor obtain a performance bond. This basically guarantees the veteran and the VA that once the project is started, it's going to be completed. So we do require a performance bond. Okay, some additional fees, which really, some of these don't really pertain. Some of these don't really pertain to the our veterans in the continental U.S. Most of these pertain to our Pacific Islands. There's not a processing fee on the continental U.S. A lot of times we don't use an escrow company. We will pay the veteran, the contractors, or we'll pay the purchaser directly. Minimal title and recording fees could be $35 or less. We will look to obtain additional homeowners insurance premium, which we will impound into the escrow account. If there's any additional hazard insurance as well. If there's property taxes, which also we don't have here for the most part, and we will also impound prepaid interest if we're closing during the middle of the month. And so we'll determine the daily accrued interest rate, and we'll impound that amount into the escrow. So when the payments do start the following month, we have sufficient interest already paid in. So these are all prepaids, and you could consider them fees, but they're really not. These are all for the benefit of the veteran. We're just collecting some of this up front because we know these items will come due in the future. Okay, so we already talked about appraisal fee, compliance fee. We talked about homeowners insurance. Pretty much talked about all these hazard insurance, performance bond. These are all items to keep in mind when applying for a natal home loan. But really, like I said, the regular loan guarantee program for veterans, if someone were to get a home loan outside of the VA, these are all standard fees that come due, which are usually prepaid out of pocket before the home closing. Okay, and for the VA funding fee, for our veterans that do not have service-connected disabilities, they are charged a VA funding fee of 1.25% of the loan amount. Now, this 1.25% can be financed into the loan. For our veterans that do have service-connected disabilities, even a 0% rating, if they have a rating, 10% rating, then they are exempt from the VA funding fee. And most of our veterans, a lot of our veterans, I would say 80% have a 10% rating or higher, just at least within the natal program that I've come across. If someone has an existing Native American direct loan and they're looking to refinance because we lowered our rates, there's also a funding fee of 0.5% for veterans that do not have service-connected disabilities. The VA funding fee can be paid out of pocket. Most veterans finance it into the loan. I pretty much touched on the service-connected disabilities. And we also, this loan is also eligible for surviving spouses as well. You know, surviving spouses are usually exempt from the VA funding fee because they're receiving a percentage of the deceased spouse's service-connected disability compensation. Okay, so that about wraps us up before questions. This is our contact information, myself and my coworkers. So if someone is interested in our natal loan and they want information, have questions, ready for the application, we have our 888-349-7541 phone number. You're welcome to call us at any time. Also below are our email addresses. So it's just our first name dot last name at va.gov. Unless there's multiple James Lewis, then it's James.Lewis 2. My supervisor, Cherie Castaneras, her email and extension is on here as well. So you're welcome to call our extensions or just call the number directly, the 888, and one of us will pick up. And the last line, General Loan Guarantee Service phone number. So for our veterans, our Native veterans, or any veterans that are not looking to build or purchase on trust land, so the regular loan guarantee program, the veteran would call 877-827-3702. And I'll just give a quick information about that. Veterans really don't even need to contact the VA if they're looking for a home loan outside of the reservation. They could just work with whatever VA approved lender they want to work with, and they'll take care of everything. And most major banks are VA approved. Okay, here are some links. If you were just to do like a Google search of VA Native American Direct Loan, you will see our website. So the first one is a link to our natal program, and the second one is for the VA Guaranteed Home Loan Program as a whole. Okay, so we'd like to open it up for any questions. If you guys want to put them in the chat, and Art and I are happy to field them, and we're happy to take questions at this time.
I know there was a question in here in the chat from Lisa earlier, and it's asked who determines or how do you determine the interest rate? In our program, the interest rate was established by Congress. They're the ones that said you're going to charge X. That's what we're doing, and that's going to be, 2.5% until March when it expires, and then they'll tell us what the new rate is. So that's who establishes and determines the interest rate. Now, I also saw another question here that said, well, maybe Greg, you want to answer this because it talks about if you don't have 12 months of on-time payment, what happens then?
Yeah, so it just depends. We underwrite on a case-by-case basis. If a veteran maybe has one late payment, or maybe they're disputing something, maybe there's a collection within that 12 months and it's rightfully not their fault, or we're able to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But if there are 2 or 3 or 4 delinquencies within that 12-month period, we would ask the veteran to reach out to us after 12 months has elapsed. So if they, currently have 6 months of good payment history, then we could ask them to reach out 6 months from there. And what we do is we do take time. If we do have to deny a loan, we do take time to counsel the veteran. And because it's just a denial for now. It's not a permanent denial, especially at any given time. They're only 12 months out when it comes to credit. Income could be a factor as well, or debt. So maybe we guide them on, well, we need to reduce your debt to income ratio by 5%. So if you pay off this credit card or this unsecured loan, or maybe you're almost done paying off your auto, if you get this paid off, then we can lower your debt to income ratio and then you qualify. So we want to emphasize that it's not a permanent denial, and we will tell veterans what their pathway forward is if they want to continue. If more than a year elapses, we'll probably run credit again. We're probably going to obtain financial documents again. Just depends. But typically, we will probably allow for 1 30-day late payment in that 12 months. But other than that, there's probably needs to be specific circumstances if we're going to allow more than one late payment in 12 months.
Now, there's another question here, or I'm not sure if it's a question, but a statement about refinancing. Again, if you have an NADL loan right now and it's 1% higher than the 2.5, say 3.5 or more, then you can apply for a refinance. But again, it has to be at least 1% difference. Otherwise, it's probably not even worth your time. But again, we only at this point able to refinance other NADL loans. Now, I know there's a law pending, and if it passes, we may be able to refinance HUD 184 loans. But that's still up in the air depending on if or when Congress decides to change that rule.
One other thing I wanted to address is if the veteran qualifies, they get 2.5%. It doesn't matter the best credit or the worst credit. If you qualify, you get 2.5. There isn't any other rate other than that, at least until through March of next year.
Also, I think that we went over it really quick, but if the veteran spouse is a member of the tribe and the veteran is not, he can still get an NADA loan as long as his name can be added to the land lease. That's the main thing. Now, some tribes will say, well, you're not a member of the tribe, you're not going to be added, so then we can't make the loan. But again, if he's not a Native American, but his wife is, under that circumstance, he can still apply for NADL loan.
Thank you. It looks like there's 2 other questions in the chat area. I appreciate our Q&A session. We've got Connor, who's asked if the application process is still electronic, if it's electronic, or if it's still a mail-in application?
So currently it's still mail in. Our budget just got increased from 1.2 million and is going up to 5 million within FY25. So we are looking at a loan origination system. Currently we're still operating like it's the 1980s, unfortunately. So we do have to, we can email the application and it can be scanned back to us, or it could be sent through the physical mail.
And I will say that this is one of those areas that, when working closely to develop the Cheyenne River Housing Authority's version of our veteran training, we made it we accounted for those sorts of issues that we would have, or that the veterans had detailed in terms of just not maybe being able to access um, a scanner and things like that to send the application back in. So we facilitated that role of a housing counseling provider or servicer to help with that. And the other question that's in the chat that I want to make sure we address is regarding credit and credit score. Do the veterans need a certain credit score to qualify for the home loan off the reservation or on trust land? Is it the same or different, I guess is the question.
So there is no minimum credit score, whether it being on or off the reservation, and that is in our VA pamphlet 26-7, which is available online, and it's chapter 4 is our credit underwriting. So it's two completely different programs. First, I'll talk about off of the reservation. Off of the reservation, it's not the VA's money, so it's up to let's say if it's Wells Fargo or Navy Federal Credit Union, Rocket Mortgage, USAA, it's their money. So you have to meet their underwriting standard. So the VA doesn't tell those banks what the minimum credit score needs to be. It's up to the bank to determine what the acceptable risk that they'll take. So there's no minimum credit score off of the reservation. It's up to the bank. On trust land, there's also no minimum credit score. We really look for reestablished credit, or 12 months. If it's 13 months ago, unless it's a bankruptcy, we'll go back 2 years on a bankruptcy. But other than a bankruptcy, if it's 13 months ago, we don't look at it. We may make mention in our underwriting that there was a delinquency, but it's outside of our window. So long story short, there's no actual credit score requirement.
Is there a minimum or maximum loan amount?
There is not. And this changed, I don't know how many years ago. I don't know if it was 4 or 5 years ago for both programs, on or off the reservation. There is not one, especially if this is your only VA loan that you currently have. I mean, I've seen one for $2 or $3 million. Now, if you're well, on the reservation, we'll only allow one at a time. One primary residence using a natal loan. Off of the reservation, you can have up to 2, but then that second home, there are maximum loan levels that the VA will honor for guarantee, and that kind of goes down a whole other rabbit hole. So you're only one primary residence. There is no maximum loan amount.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
One more thing, excuse me. On the modifications or repair loans,
Yes.
it's important that we understand that anytime we make a loan, including that one, we have to have a first position on that lien. So if there's an existing loan, we're not able to do a repair loan. It has to be a first clear note and a first position.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that information. I do appreciate the opportunity to have a Q&A session, and certainly you can put the questions in the chat area, and or we'll also have contact information put in the chat area as well, so that you can ask any additional questions. For the sake of time, we're going to switch gears here.
There's actually one more question that y'all weren't able to see because it was sent to me in the host chat. Sorry, I've been waiting for y'all to finish.
Sure.
Veterans are defined as what? Does that include National Guards? And do they have to have served for 20 years?
Well, we obtain a certificate of eligibility, and that could be there's different requirements, but National Guards reserves are eligible to receive a certificate of eligibility, which would be on or off the reservation. So so character of service and length of service, it's kind of an open-ended question, and I would actually refer that person to our loan production department, to, if it's a specific situation, I would refer that person to our loan production department, the people that issue the COEs. So you don't need 20 years. I don't know if Art has more information. This isn't my background, but if I had one veteran that got injured in basic training, and he had 23 days of service, and he was eligible. So there's definitely a wide variety of eligibility requirements and so forth.
And so this is why I think also to having a conversation, your tribe or organization with the NADL staff. It used to be that they were based on region. Now you can contact just the NADL loan office, and you'll as you said, be assigned to one person from beginning to end. But then the COE question can be asked. Sometimes there was some confusion because lenders who are available or approved to provide the VA loan, they'd start there, then find out that they actually needed to go to an NADL office. So I think that these are the sorts of questions that once you define what your veteran outreach program will look like, you can get those individual questions answered and get a copy of the COE out to the veterans for them to take a look at it, see what it looks like, how to fill it out properly, or if it's not filled out properly, because that was some of the issues that we found, that maybe they would turn it in and get denied and not know why or what they needed to do to fix it. So these are the sorts of things that your offices might be able to, in the future, your programs, tailor your veteran services to support, getting it right the first time. So again, I've got a jam-packed session for you all, and we definitely want to make sure that your questions are addressed. So if there are no other questions in the chat area, we'll switch gears. I will have Art come back on at the very end. There's another program that might have some funds available for veterans that he wants to just mention. And so I'll go ahead and do that at the end, just to make sure that we have time for the VASH discussion as well, if that's okay with you all.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig and Art. I really appreciate it. And we'll have you all back on here in a minute. At this time, I want to go ahead and bring on Bridget Course. She is a consultant, first and foremost, with Bo Simone Consulting, but also she's just a wealth of knowledge as it relates to tribal HUD-VASH as a supportive housing trainer and specialist. So I will go ahead and switch gears and have you all learn about tribal HUD-VASH and how it's currently operating as a program of the VA, but then and the tribes, but also to, maybe you're in the development stages. You're not sure what addressing your community's homelessness would look like. And so this gives you an idea of what different communities are doing as well. So I am very thankful to have Bridget come on and speak to you all today.
Hi, my name is Bridget Course. And as far as presenting goes, as I go through the slideshow, I am going to kind of bounce around to different topics and different things. And for me, it's always more effective if you just type the questions as they go, and one of our hosts will kind of interrupt me from speaking and give me an opportunity to answer the question as it comes up for you. That's kind of the way I prefer to do it. My email is at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. And your host should also be providing you with a PDF version of this. So I work for a company called Bo Simone Consulting. We're based in Colorado. I'm located in Durango, Colorado. One of my colleagues is in Denver. Another one is in Duluth, Minnesota. So we're spread out. We are not consultants that haven't done the work. All three of us have worked extensively with homeless populations, in nonprofits, developing housing, doing direct services. So our area of expertise is supportive housing. And that is housing for people who struggle with homelessness, who struggle with housing stability, who are in and out of housing for many years. And so that model of housing is an area we specialize in. About 60% of the work we do nationally is in tribal communities. And so we work with Native nonprofits, tribes, TDHEs to develop projects like this. And depending on the state that you live in, it can be really easy to put together and it can be a challenge depending on the way funding's structured state by state. But today I want to talk a little bit about Tribal HUD VASH. Because that is an area that I've been specializing in our work since the program started in 2015. What is Tribal HUD VASH? Well, Tribal HUD VASH is permanent supportive housing. So it is an intervention that is used to end homelessness. We know that that HUD introduced a VASH program in the early 2000s to address homelessness among veterans. And it has been very successful solution to homelessness. And we began to have a lot of concern on the part of tribal leadership. Maybe some of you who are on the phone today, tribal housing leadership, veterans leadership and representation across the country. We know that Native individuals serve in the military at a much higher rate than the general population. There's a really strong tradition of serving in the military and armed forces. And we were seeing a disproportionate number of American Indian, Native American homeless veterans who weren't adequately being served by the VASH program. So because of advocacy from people like you, people within those communities, the Tribal HUD VASH demonstration program was passed in 2014, funded. And what that program did was establish a separate program for tribes to house their veterans with a housing subsidy that's provided in their own community. So that's kind of the background for Tribal HUD VASH. So Tribal HUD VASH overview is veteran supportive housing program, and it provides rental assistance and supportive services to Native American veterans who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, who live on or near reservation or in other Indian areas. So under the Tribal HUD VASH program, every awardee, there were 26 original awardees who were invited to apply for the program. And there's 6 expansion grantees. There's been several expansion rounds, and there's been 6 additional grantees nationally. And they haven't had an expansion round in the Tribal HUD VASH program in a while. However, I would expect that HUD might be looking at that in the next year for potential additional expansion. So be thinking about that. Under the program, though, tribes and TDHEs are able to define what their service area is. So some tribes have chosen to be very specific, just their reservation, just that county, their reservation or counties where the reservation is located. Under NAHASDA, the service area can be much larger. So some tribes cover multiple states, right? I'm thinking of the Navajo Nation. And so their service area is quite large and includes the cities that border the reservation, because there's not enough housing to accommodate all of the veterans. So every tribe gets to define that in the way that they see fit. Next slide. So VASH is a partnership between the tribes, TDHEs, and the VA. So under this program, there's an annual rental assistance grant that comes with some administrative funding. And the grant is awarded to the tribe or TDHE. That grant provides housing assistance in the form of rental assistance subsidies. It develops and it provides that rental assistance. The tribe or TDH role is also to develop and provide housing units. So the expectation would be that you would use those rental subsidies in your tribally owned units that are not FCAS. So FCAS units are ineligible because they already have a subsidy attached. But any of your NAHASDA units, any of your, if you have low-income housing tax credit units, those are fine to use these subsidies in. Or you could also, if you don't have enough housing, you could also use this rental assistance as a tenant-based model. If you do use it as a tenant-based model and provide rental assistance to private landlords on behalf of your veterans, your role would also be to recruit landlords, manage the grant funding along with the policies and procedures that come with it. So this is a HUD grant, it's a period of performance grant. You have to renew it every year. And if you don't spend that grant down in the year that it's awarded, all of that money returns to HUD at the end of the performance period. There's no extensions on it. There's also additional regulatory policies and procedures related to tribal HUD VASH rental grants. You also will be responsible for program evaluation, expansion, and compliance with all of those rules and regulations. And finally, VASH is a partnership between the tribe and the VA. So as the housing authority, TDHE, housing department, you're also going to be tasked with maintaining a relationship with the VA. The VA's role in the program is really that under permanent supportive housing, one of the things that's different when you're working with populations coming out of homelessness is the provision of case management, supportive services, all of those services that help people remain stable in housing. So under this program, you are going to have a clinical social worker employed by the VA assigned to the caseload of veterans on your program. So there's a two-step process and eligibility. One is on the housing side for the rental assistance and the housing part. And the other eligibility piece is the clinical determination that somebody needs case management and supportive services to remain housed on the VA side. So both sides are tasked with maintaining a strong relationship. Next slide. So again, the VASH background, that stands for Veterans Administration Supportive Housing, authorized in 2015. It allows tribes and TDHEs to be eligible for HUD VASH subsidy program, combines NAHASDA rental assistance and housing choice voucher programs. So there's characteristics of both within this program. Requires regular reporting, and there's annual renewals. And as I said, it's a performance period grant. So tribal HUD VASH has some different qualities than the traditional HUD VASH program. So homeless or at risk of homelessness. So tribes are allowed to use an expanded definition of homelessness under this program. I ran a VASH program in Southwest Colorado under our voucher program. It was not tribal. We had to be very strict about our definition of homelessness when we leased up a veteran. They had to be in a shelter, on the streets, camping, that kind of thing. We know that homelessness looks different in tribal communities. We know that relatives often don't turn away relatives, and that people struggle with being doubled up and overcrowded. So under the program, we are able to use an expanded definition of homelessness, including somebody who might be at imminent risk of losing their housing. So that's a really big deal. Income level. So under NAHASDA, we know that the definition of low income is 80% AMI and below. With traditional VASH programs, veterans would have to qualify at 40 or 30% of the area median income. And service-connected disability exclusions you may use those in the Tribal HUD VASH program, because under NAHASDA, that's excluded income. Whereas if we send our tribal veterans to a non-tribal VASH program, that income would be counted and they'd often be deemed ineligible for the program. So that's a win. That's a difference in that program. They live on or near the reservation. And again, the tribe gets to set this policy around how they implement the VASH program. So if it's important to bring certain veterans home from large cities that are a little distance away, they can put that as a priority in their program. If they want to focus just on the veterans who are homeless within their community or on the reservation, they can make that a priority. They need to be eligible for VA services as a veteran, and that's determined by the VA. The VA did require that the person be honorably discharged in the very beginning of this program, but there's other discharge statuses that are now eligible under the Tribal HUD VASH program. And so it's important that we let the VA kind of go through their determination process rather than housing kind of screen people for eligibility. Must be a member of a federally recognized tribe. So again, under Tribal HUD VASH, tribes are able to determine, all right, we only want to serve our own tribal members, right? So in the case of Navajo Nation, for example, they only serve their tribal members. They only have 20 vouchers, 20 subsidies, and they could probably use 60, right, with their population and their number of veterans. So they limit it to tribal members, whereas another tribe that might have a lower population of veterans, that maybe have a lot of veterans who are enrolled in other tribes in their community, may choose to serve all enrolled tribal members. They must not be a lifetime registered sex offender. So in support of housing, the responsibility for expanding opportunity and lowering barriers to housing is on the housing authority. So you really have to be able to accept the fact that it's a supportive housing program. You're going to use a less strict background check criteria to move them into housing, and that's one of the expectations of the program. So whether you've evicted them before, they owe you money, or they have a criminal background, the expectation is that we're using a housing first lens, meaning that we are giving people another chance to become housed because we know they have the supportive services. So we're giving them that additional chance to remain housed and to get into housing. We're not going to have a bunch of barriers for them. However, every adult member of that household, including the veteran, but including their adult children, their spouses, parents, whatever, they are all screened to make sure they're not in the lifetime sex offender registry that makes them ineligible for this program. Veteran must need and agree to participate in VA case management and supportive services. So they have to be deemed eligible by the case manager at the VA to need these services to remain housed. and they must be willing to sign a case management agreement with that social worker at the VA. So again, the process would be income eligibility, tribal preferences. So under the program, you'll have priority clients. So maybe the tribe where the program's located, and secondary clients, all other tribes. So you can do that prioritization. Service area, it should be defined in your Indian housing plan and very clearly in your policies and procedures, as well as the sex offender exclusion. On the VA side is typically the process is that the housing authority will, or TDHE or housing department, will identify the veteran and work collaboratively with the VA case manager to maintain an interest list. They will look and determine whether they're eligible under VA guidelines. Is that veteran meeting the clinical need for case management in order to remain housed? Will they agree to participate in case management? Do they meet that expanded definition of homelessness? If approved by the housing and the VA, the regulations on the VASH side is that the veteran pays no more than 30% for their portion of the rent. So in HUD speak, it's a little different from EWONAP speak. 30% is kind of the industry standard for rental subsidies that people should be able to, what's considered affordable is 30% of their income. So you're not allowed to charge that veteran more than 30%. But you're certainly allowed, as consistent with what your tribal housing policy is, if you charge people 15% of their income in rent or 20%, or even in some cases under this program, we look at veterans who are coming out of homelessness, they have nothing. So sometimes there'll be a waiver and people will pay nothing in rent for the first year while they pull their lives together. Again, the tribe gets to set that policy. They just can't go over 30%. The tribal HUD VASH grant pays the difference between the fair market rent and what the veteran household can afford based on their income. The requirement is also to use fair market rent standards published by HUD annually. And so you would use that HUD FMR lookup to see what the rental subsidy available is. Because tribes identify a service area that might be multiple counties, you're able to actually choose just one county and apply that FMR to your entire service area. So say you had 3 counties and the highest FMR could be applied to the entire service area. So the way that works would be the fair market rent minus the tenant payment equals the monthly rent subsidy. So for example, if the FMR is 1,000 for a 1-bedroom apartment, 30% income would be, well, it wouldn't be 200, it would be 300, but 200 is the subsidy and would be the tenant payment, and the subsidy would be 800. So that would be paid in a tenant-based model. It would be paid to a private landlord that you have a contract with, and you provide the rental subsidy for the veteran. Or what's preferable, because it keeps the money in tribal housing units, is that you draw down the rent on behalf of the tenant monthly for their portion of the rent. If there's any questions, please let me know. So again, I want to jump back to, there are a significant number of homeless veterans. Like we talked about home ownership. It was really great to listen in. My area is rental housing, and more specifically supportive housing. And so until we fully address veteran homelessness, we're going to continue to be talking about ways to get our veterans out of shelters, off the streets, and in homes that, are safe and affordable, and help them live lives, with dignity and respect that they deserve as veterans. So VASH is supportive housing, where the housing is provided by the tribe. The supportive services are provided by the VA in partnership. It's a housing first model, so we don't want to have a ton of barriers in accessing housing. One of the things you'll have to look at as a tribal housing program is, are we willing to create fewer barriers for homeless veterans in accessing housing? Are we going to make it easier if we receive this money for those veterans to get another chance at housing? The utilization of trauma-informed programming and care, that is something that goes without saying for the VA, because they're the case managers, social worker. But this also means using a trauma-informed programming and care lens with your entire housing staff. And I would argue that that goes even beyond supportive housing. And that just means really figuring out ways to address trauma in our policies and our procedures, have staff that are aware of when we're triggering people's traumas. There's nothing that can be more triggering to anybody, really, than having their housing threatened or having a housing barrier, or not being able to pay their rent and worrying about homelessness. So having your staff trained in trauma-informed care. Case management requirement. That is not always the case with every supportive housing project, but with the VA program, it is a requirement. And that doesn't mean that we, under the Housing First model, we don't force people to quit using alcohol or drugs. We don't force them into a psychiatrist evaluation or on medication. But what it does mean is that case manager might have one goal for that person, and that might be housing stability. And that case manager works with them to maintain housing, because that is what we're trying to intervene with tribal head VASH. Program management on the other end is the responsibility of the tribe and TDHE. So I talked a little bit about the scattered site tenant-based rental assistance model. I would say about half of the programs are set up like this, where the veteran is approved for a housing subsidy. The benefits of this is that the tribes have not had to change their admission policies for their own units, because they don't want to accept people who've been evicted or have bad backgrounds. And they are able to still help veterans with a tenant-based rental assistance payment to a private landlord. In this model, typically the VA case manager does a lot of case management and one-on-one work with the veteran to identify a unit that meets the HUD fair market rent standards, and help that veteran apply for and obtain housing. Once the housing is obtained, the housing authority or department enters into a contract with that private landlord that says, all right, we will pay you $800 per month on behalf of Bridget. She's renting from you. Her responsibility is $200 that will be due directly to you every month. And the other program, and some would argue this is more beneficial, is a project-based tribal housing model, where tribes have not historically been able to use Section 8 vouchers in their units. That is changing to some degree, but that has not been part of what you receive. You receive your Indian Housing Block Grant, and you have to make that work. And under this model, we have the ability to take this rental assistance and attach it to units that we own and operate to subsidize the operations. And so In some communities, this has been a really great way, to prioritize homeless veterans, have them housed typically in all one building, one apartment building, where the case manager can come hold office hours on site, meet with everybody. They can have community events, veterans events, all of those types of things on site. And the operations for that property is fully subsidized by the Tribal HUD VASH grant. So those are two ways to operate the program. So currently applying for Tribal HUD VASH currently, I can't tell any of you that there's an opportunity to apply right now or even predict that that will be open. My expectation is that it would be. And so if it's something you're looking at doing, one thing to do is to really start thinking about how you might set up a program if the funding became available, because sometimes these expansion applications have a very short turnaround. So really working through and talking through a project concept about how it would work, establishing relationships with your local VA or local veterans programs, even if they're non-tribal, can be a really positive step moving forward. So again, there was 26 awarded in 2015 and 8 Tribal HUD VASH expansion recipients in 21 and 22. And again, this may be available to additional tribes in the future. If you are identifying veterans, it's really important to try to, especially if you live near communities that have a non-tribal VASH program, to be doing those referrals for your homeless veterans in your community, because at the time that you decide or choose to apply, because it benefits the veterans. That's the number one reason. But if you were to go back and apply several years from now, you already have this established relationship with the VA for your tribal veterans. Let's see, develop and prioritize units for veterans experiencing homelessness. So one of the tribes that I've worked with, several tribes I've worked with have said, even before Tribal HUD VASH was available, we just honor our veterans so strongly. We just prioritize them. They get housing first. We are building a building specifically for veterans. That's just what our values are. And so at least one of these tribal projects was able to go back in 2021 and apply for the Tribal HUD VASH subsidy, but they already had an apartment building operating with veterans in it. The other thing I think that's important is identifying your needs. So if you're not, for your waiting list, collecting data from people, there should be a question on your application for the housing waiting list that says, are you a veteran? And even better, asking if they've ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces, because I noticed this with my own father, who's a Vietnam veteran. Some people are reluctant to identify themselves as veterans if they haven't seen active combat, like if they've done other things in the military. So I like the question, have you ever served in the U.S. Armed Forces? And if you're homeless. So if you, and use that expanded definition. If you have those two pieces of information on your waitlist data, when it's time to apply for a funding source that addresses homelessness or serves veterans, you have that information to pull from your waitlist and say, yes, we have 24 veterans who are struggling with housing stability. They're overcrowded, they're about to lose housing, whatever. And lastly, some people prioritize veterans over all other populations, just like you might prioritize elders. Think about different policies that you can use on your wait list. for identifying data, but also to prioritize veterans when a housing opportunity becomes available. Again, understanding the Tribal HUD-VASH program, these are some resources and links that you can go to on the Code Talk website. They will also be available within the PDF version of this PowerPoint for you to reference later. There's quite a bit of information to be found there. And just some things to consider as you're thinking about expanding to this program. It requires strong grant management and compliance, regular drawdowns. So monthly, you're going to be wanting to draw down that full rent roll, your administrative fees. You're going to want to be able to document your admin fees were used for eligible expenses. There's the annual renewal process. So the period of performance for the grant is October 1st through September 30th annually. Annual recertifications, like most housing programs, annual recertifications are required for all participants. Accurate and thorough record keeping. Most of you already have these strong systems in place, so it's pretty easy to expand to Tribal HUD-VASH. Grant closeouts annually and the return of unspent funds back to HUD. And the utilization of administrative fees, which I mentioned already. So one of the programs I wanted to talk about was the Psalika Warrior Apartments. That is on at Crow Agency, Montana. They decided they wanted to do a veterans program, a veterans apartment building. And they built this beautiful apartment building using low-income housing tax credits from the state of Montana in anticipation of the Tribal HUD-VASH program coming out. And it was disappointing for them initially because they were not one of the invited tribes to apply. So they subsidized this project for a number of years, 5 or 6 years, until there was an expansion opportunity for the Tribal HUD-VASH program. So this program is really great. The case manager who lives in the community has an office there. The local veterans program has an office there in the common space. There's also a Ross grant coordinator at the Housing Authority. So Psalika Housing Authority does a really great job with this program. There's a number of supports for veterans. There's community building activities and meals and resources for the veterans on site in the building. And that's it for my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Hello?
I have a question in regards to your discussion on the trauma-informed care. Recently, the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition requested a training just to talk about trauma-informed care with their housing practitioners. And it turned out to be a really great discussion because it was twofold. Both, we want to make sure that we're mindful of how we as practitioners are, asking questions, how to respond when there are when negative things are thrown our way as well, right? So I think also the care factor, your own level of care as a practitioner was important. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on whether you're seeing an increase in that request for training or how it relates to making sure that the staff is prepared for something like VASH, a VASH program. Hey, Bridget, did I lose you? You might be on mute.
Real quick, I'm just going to launch today's webinar feedback survey before we start losing folks. All of you attendees, if you could just take a moment to complete this, please. It's completely anonymous. You could be as candid as you'd like. And then it helps us at the Native Learning Center know more of what you're really loving about our webinars and more of what you would like to see improved upon in the future. And we also do share that feedback with our instructors, so it helps them as well. I'm just going to go ahead and do the closeout, Marie. Y'all, the chat is still open. So if you have questions for either Marie or Bridget or Art or Craig, feel free to send them in. And I'm just going to kind of do my little outro here. I hope y'all can join us for the next webinar we're going to be having on this Thursday. That's going to be about Native Business Counseling 101. That'll be presented by Russ Siegel, who's the Executive Director of the Sequoia Fund, which is a Native CDFI. Registration is free as always. Feel free to access this as well as any other recorded webinars on our website, nativelearningcenter.com. If you go on there, there is a Catheta Webinars tab, and then within that, there is a whole recorded webinar section, and that has our archives for about the past 2 years. So you can view those, you can share them with your friends, share them with your colleagues. Please also check out our upcoming events. They're posted to our various social media. You can friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, we're on Twitter and LinkedIn. There's also an in-house produced podcast titled the Hopathanga Native American Podcast. And on that, we discuss more focused topics within Native American housing and self-determination. But you can check that out on Simplecast, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And if you're somebody who more likes to watch videos of the interviews themselves, then you can check out the videos with our guests on our YouTube channel. And it looks like Bridget is saying that she's not sure what happened with her sound, but if y'all have any questions specifically for her, she invited you to follow up through email.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that, Brooke. I appreciate that. And I did before, if you have a chance to stay on, I know Art had some funding, just an opportunity for, I guess it was down payment assistance. Am I correct?
No, actually, it was about disabled veteran grants that were available.
Okay.
But I mean, that's fine.
Yes.
You know,
No, go right ahead. I would love for you to be able to tell the folks that are in the room about it.
Sure. Now, the reason I like to always bring it up is because I worked in that department for over 16 years, and it was amazing to me how many veterans I could talk to that never even knew these grants were available. If you have a veteran that's service-connected disabled and has a loss of use of his legs or sight or hands or arms or respiratory issues, there's grants. One of them is called the SAH grant. If you apply, all you simply fill out an application, and if you're found eligible, they'll give you up to $117,000. You can use that money to modify a home to meet the adaptive needs, or use it toward building a new home. And it can also be a new home on tribal land. We did one in El Paso like that with a tribe there. But they also have, again, the loss of use of just the hands or respiratory is a SHA grant. That's $23,444. And then the third grant, and it's in that flyer I sent you, it's under VRNE for Independent Living Grant. And again, if you are only 50% disabled and not working, you can apply for a grant of $107,000, which will help make your home accessible as well. So again, those are just programs that are out there. All these can be found on the VA benefit books, but it's important that people know about them because, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm always amazed of how many people don't even know of other benefits that VA offers.
Well, thank you, Art. I really appreciate that. That information that he also mentioned about the specially adapted housing program can be found in the files area under number 5. There's a flyer there with that information. And again, as we look to ways to support our veterans, whether that's updating a home to meet their needs or addressing homelessness in your community, or also sometimes even homeownership, folks that are in homeownership are kind of quiet about it, don't want to say a whole lot. They almost feel guilty about homeownership, and they shouldn't, because it is certainly an accomplishment if they're able to achieve it, right? So I think that I'm so thankful that we were able to have this conversation any one of these topics could have been on their own, but to be able to just bring it to your attention as an opportunity for you to engage with your veteran community is something that I'm thankful we're able to do here. So with that, we just want to thank you for spending your time with us, and we appreciate your feedback on how we can continue to have this conversation across our communities. So with that, thank you, Art, Craig, and Bridget, for an awesome opportunity to provide your information to our communities, and to the Native Learning Center, we say thank you.